guess, poking fun at like the kind of things that people put on LinkedIn. But yeah, I am a life
Yeah,
a lifelong.
just for our audience, your
Yeah, yeah.
LinkedIn tagline is some beautiful, some several buzzwords. That's what it says. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you see on LinkedIn, like people put all these things on their taglines, like AI, finance,
Yeah.
this and that, and I'm like, all right, cool. So I just was like, I don't know which buzzwords to put.
Hi, Shujit. How's it going?
Hey, man, doing good. How about you guys?
We're
Good.
doing good.
All good.
Yeah.
And how do you like the weather in Boston? I think it's better than winters.
Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. I think this year we kind of skipped spring, went straight into summer. We
Yeah.
skipped fall last year, so we're not getting those beautiful days of like 65 and 70 for the whole day and sunny, but it's getting warm. It's definitely better in the winter, like you said.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think the rains have made it a lot better. The sky,
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah. It's been a rainy couple of months, honestly. I guess there's something about weather patterns and storms that I was reading about. So no, let's hope it calms down though. I don't want rain all through the summer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about your bachelor's degree, you did your bachelor's in computer science. So how was your
Hmm.
experience like in Northeastern?
Yeah, so I did my bachelor's in it was a combined degree at Northeastern, computer science and finance. So, or at computer science and business administration, and then I chose my concentration in finance after the first year and a half or so. That was good. So, I mean, the reason I wanted to do that was really in high school. I really liked technology and computers, as I think most people tend to do these days.
Hmm.
And obviously, that seemed like the path of least resistance to, moving to the US for college, getting a job in tech and all of that. But then, kind of very quickly, I realized that computer science in its purest form, if you want to call it, kind of the software engineering path, definitely wasn't for me.
Hmm.
So I was exploring, how to make that work with business administration, marketing, finance, and everything. And finance ended up being the one that I chose with and stuck out. And I think it was a good decision. I'm definitely happy with that choice.
Cool.
Yeah. So, so Northeastern, and then you're a double Husky, right? So you've
Hmm.
done both your bachelor's and master's. So how was
Yep.
the how would you compare the master's with bachelor's in terms of the internships or the co-ops that you could do, or possibly even the rigor, the academic rigor that you have in a
Hmm.
master's course versus what you have in a bachelor's course?
Give me a minute, guys.
Yeah. So, like you said, I am a double Husky. I did my bachelor's at Northeastern, and then I graduated in the wonderful time of summer 2020. So it was kind of a decision had to be made, like, what am I going to do? And at the time, um, like I said, I concentrated in finance, but that was not a very quantitative path at the undergrad level. And with my background in CS as well, kind of quantitative finance seemed the logical next step. And it was something I was interested in because I didn't know much about it. And honestly, I was a bit skeptical of the whole concept because I was in like a value fund where it was very fundamental based and all of that. So I went with that quantitative finance master's. And you asked how was it different? I mean, in terms of rigor, I mean, definitely the master's program was quite rigorous. Definitely compared to my undergrad finance degree, I think the CS part of my undergrad degree was probably equally as rigorous as my master's in quantitative finance. But obviously, the thing is, it's super compressed, right? It's like a 1 year long program, so because of that, it's like a constant thing. Whereas in undergrad, you kind of have semesters where you're taking a lighter course load or you're on co-op.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know if something's changed. I don't know, I only graduated like a year and a half ago, but at the time we didn't have co-ops for our masters. I know a lot of people did internships.
Hmm.
I didn't go that path. I chose to just kind of like run through it. I did both the summers and graduated September to September, so September to August. So I did it all in 1 year. I didn't choose to do any internships or co-ops. Also, the market wasn't that great back then, so people were struggling, and I was like, let me just get through this and try to start looking for full time. That was my thought process at the time.
And I've seen a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I've seen a few people who did the CS course in Northeastern, and they got a job in quant trading. So do you think that path was really open for you, or like was the market the reason that you couldn't like explore that path?
Yeah, so the path definitely was open. You're right. It makes sense to kind of go into more quant heavy or more CS kind of programming side heavy paths if you already have that solid background in computer science, like quant trading or high frequency trading, that kind of stuff. The path was kind of open, but honestly, at that time and even now, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do super long term. I interviewed for a couple roles in trading positions. Nothing really came of that. And then, as I'm sure you guys are gonna see, and people have probably told you, like, when you're an international student, you're kind of trying to get a job as soon as possible. And especially when you're not entirely sure what you want to do, you're also drawn to things like brand allure of the companies. And, I interviewed for like a quant trading role at a really small firm. I can't even remember the name of it. It was based out in Connecticut, and they only had like couple small, it was like I think under $50 million in AUM, but that's technically small. I had never heard of it. None of my friends had heard of it. My parents hadn't heard of it. So I interviewed. The interview went well, but then I was kind of like, I don't know about this. So the priorities were slightly different back then, I would say.
Can you walk us through your entire process, the interview process and the application process?
At Morgan Stanley or just in general?
No, in the interview that you got for the quant trading position.
Oh yeah, sure. So I think with those type of positions, it's a fairly standard process, right? The first thing is you apply, obviously. You get an email back from a robot saying, take this, programming test where you have 30 minutes to do some random stuff on Kaggle or whatever the coding courses are, like the algorithmic problem solving things are. It's a little bit of algorithms, a little bit of just basic CS, maybe some finance questions. You do that, and then I had another robot email me saying, okay, you've passed this part of the test. Now here's a couple of just behavioral questions. Record yourself answering these, right? And you record yourself answering those. And I did that, and then the robot emailed saying, all right, great, you did this one as well. You're gonna get a call from somebody in HR. Got a call from somebody in HR. They asked me kind of, again, generalized questions, kind of verifying things on my resume, I guess, make sure I hadn't lied. And then after that, there was like, okay, we'll get back to you if anything comes up. But then by that point, I had already been further ahead in my Morgan Stanley process. So I'd kind of shut that and any other interviews I had going on. But I imagine it would have been another couple of rounds with an actual person this time, and then maybe a technical round or something like that. But yeah, I think that interview process is for more technical roles is fairly standardized, where there's a lot of prerequisite screening to make sure you're not lying about your skills. And then you get into like the culture fit and all of that kind of stuff.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can see that you're an associate now at Morgan Stanley. So, what is your role exactly, if you're allowed to tell us, firstly? And for students like us who are quant finance graduates, possibly pursuing their quant finance degrees, and are not with computer science or engineering backgrounds, what do you feel should be their trajectory if they want to get into a quant job? Starting off the first about your role at Morgan Stanley.
Yeah. So I can talk about my role a little bit. So I'm an associate in the performance and analytics department of Morgan Stanley Investment Management. So you guys might know this, but for the benefit of anybody who doesn't know, these big banks like Goldman, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, they tend to have a few different divisions, right? So at Morgan Stanley, we have MSIM, which is Morgan Stanley Investment Management. That's the asset management business, which is I'm a part of. And then other than that, there's wealth management, which is for similar to asset management, but for like high net wealth clients and things like that. And then there's the investment bank essentially, which is called the institutional equities division. But that's the investment bank, the traders, the people who write options, that kind of things reside over there. So in the investment management division where I'm part of, what we do in performance and analytics is we're in charge of generating, reporting, and generally doing anything related to performance of all of the funds that we offer at Morgan Stanley. And another kind of part of this that may or may not be interesting is a few years ago, Morgan Stanley went through a merger with a company called Eaton Vance, which is a Boston-based asset management firm. And so what my team does is we're in charge of all of the legacy Eaton Vance business for performance. And we're also heavily involved in the kind of integration effort between MSIM and Eaton Vance from that perspective. And honestly, on a day-to-day basis, my job looks very similar to a data scientist or a data analyst. It's working with a bunch of different parties, making sure data feeds are working, doing some quantitative analysis here and there, but mostly it's a very data-intensive position, more so than what might be considered kind of traditionally quantitative, which is more math and programming. I mean, we do a lot of programming, but it's not very complex stuff, if you understand what I mean, because it's mutual funds valuations, things like that. Yeah.
So
yeah, and the second part of your question was how do you get a job in a quantitative field? I don't know if I'm best suited to answer that because I didn't go down that path entirely. I mean, to some degree, but again, it's kind of the basic things, like get good at programming, get good at Python, do your math class as well, and kind of have that unified skill set, so to speak. But we can touch on that more as we go on if you want to.
Yeah. So I remember the first time I talked to you, you said you automated everything in your role. So, I wanted to know how many of you guys are working in a team and how did you automate everything and what is a part of your analysis that you do?
Sure. Honestly, I'm not sure how much detail I can get into on this, but we'll do it anyways and see what happens, right? So, on our team, on our legacy team, it's four of us. So there's the head of the department, as a director, and then there's a vice president on our team, and then there's us two associates, both of whom were hired around the same time frame, like late 2022. Obviously, my background. My colleague is he also went to Northeastern, fairly recent graduate, and he's a data science master's. So in terms of automation, what we were doing is, and what you guys might be shocked to hear is that even at these really big banks, a lot of stuff was still very much Excel based, especially for reporting. It was get all this data from the databases, do a bunch of calculations within Excel, verify some things, send it out to the investment teams or to the regulators or whoever it was. And it's repetitive processes that you do either every week or every month. And it's the same calculations. And whenever there was an issue with it, it was generally human error, right? Somebody wasn't having a good day that day and fat fingered something and put 10 basis points to 1 basis point somewhere and causes a huge issue, right? So the first thing I saw was, all right, we've had these issues in the past, not very often, to be fair, because the group does good work, but there have been issues, and we're liable to have these issues in the future as well. And also, this is taking up, 50% of our time just doing these things where we could be doing other projects, right? So what we did was we automated all of these. When I say automated, it's writing Python scripts, C# programs, in some cases creating Tableau reports for the data when it's a kind of more simple process. And in sometimes working with other groups in the firm to kind of streamline the processes. And yeah, I did that for the better part of a year, and now our month-end processes at least are like very streamlined. It's not very labor intensive, and it's very unlikely that there will be a mistake. And if there's a mistake, it's usually an issue with the data that's going in. I mean, garbage in, garbage out, or it's something kind of one-off that happens that you have to address. So mostly I just have to hit run on a script and we get our stuff done. Yeah.
Got it.
Makes sense. I mean, we can see that you've written that you're a lifelong autodidact. So what do you invest your time in self-learning?
Yeah, so I guess you're reading that from my LinkedIn bio, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I wrote that in career management class, as I'm sure you guys did as well at some point. So it's yeah, the whole thing is a little bit in jest, poking fun at like the kind of things that people put on LinkedIn. But yeah, I am a
Yeah, just for our audience, your
Yeah.
LinkedIn tagline is several buzzwords. That's what it says.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you see on LinkedIn, like, people put all these things on their taglines, like AI, finance, this and that, and I'm like, all right, cool. So I just was like, I don't know which buzzwords to put. Yeah, I wouldn't go out in public and say I'm a lifelong autodidact. It sounds a bit funny, but yeah, I have always been into kind of self-directed learning. I mean, in undergrad, I was a computer science and finance major, but I got super into like philosophy when I was in undergrad. So I spent a lot of time reading philosophy and to some degree writing about it as well. More recently, it's been kind of slightly more esoteric subjects like unification of knowledge and consilience and just behavioral finance a lot and consumer behavior and stuff like that. I mean, just really whatever interests me. I tend to go down rabbit holes for a while, which in college was not very good because it distracts you from what you're actually trying to learn. I mean, if you're in a software dev class, but you're really spending majority of your time reading about the history of the Middle East, you're not going to be in a good position when that software dev exam comes about, right? But I think it's served me well to build a more wide base of knowledge that I can draw from every now and then. And it's also helpful in the corporate world because it's kind of like with the automations, for example, right? You're not taught in our course how to automate reporting like that, right? It's kind of just something you got to Google around and find out, and then you got to, when you work for a big company like Morgan Stanley, you got to look through all of their documents as well, see what's allowed and what's not allowed. So it serves you well, and it's a good way to train yourself on how to figure things out when there's no like defined path, I suppose. Yeah.
Got it. Since your team is very small, like 4 or 5 of you guys, where do you see yourself in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's a difficult question, right? Because I got accepted for my H-1B recently. So that's a step in the right direction, definitely. In terms of where do I see myself in the next 3 to 5 years, I think just generally speaking, I want to take on more difficult challenges, lead more projects. I've had a chance to lead a couple of smaller projects, smaller initiatives. I'd like to be the lead in some bigger projects, maybe some cross-functional projects, play a bigger role in decision making in terms of infrastructure, if that's possible. Obviously, that's difficult to do at such a nascent stage in your career, but something like that, just kind of grow and add value to the firm. I mean, when I was interviewing for jobs, kind of the main question that I would ask is, can I join and can I add immediate value here, or is it going to be like editing PowerPoint presentations for the first 3 or 4 years just to prove your worth, you know? And I just had no interest in doing that. I just wanted to get in and add as much value as possible from the get-go. And I think I've been able to do that. And I just want to be able to continue doing that at a larger scale going forward for the next 3 to 5 years, which also coincidentally it happens to be around the time of the H1B length. So then after that, we'll see. But yeah, that's kind of a vague answer on that front. Yeah.
So what's the career progression like? So you start as an analyst, then you get a senior analyst, then as an associate, and after that?
Yeah. So in our division, I guess we actually start at the associate level. I mean, there are analysts, but very few. In our group, it's kind of been associate, and then it's a bit weird. You go associate, then you go director, then you go vice president, executive director, managing director. But obviously, there's no kind of defined career progression there, in the sense of like you do this for 2 years and you become that. It's kind of up to the firm, and also depends on other people's performance around you. But ultimately, I don't think that title matters that much. You know, I think you really get to measure your progression by how involved you can be in initiatives and how much people value your opinion, and then obviously how much you get paid, right? That's ultimately, I think, the biggest indicator of how well you're doing or how much you're progressing, you know? You can get a promotion and not get a pay rise, and it's like, all right, you can put something else at the bottom of your emails, but really, have you really moved that much further ahead in your career? That's the way I think about it, at least.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So I had a question. So you said your colleague, the guy who got in with you, like at the same time, he was from a data science background, and you had a background of CS. So how do students like us who have no background in CS or data science and are here just with the MSQF degree, what would they put on their resume in order to get a job like you are doing right now?
Right. Well, the good news there is that now you guys do have a degree in computer science and data science with this MSQF. And, you know, one thing that I found kind of interesting about the MSQF was the way they approach the kind of computational programming side of the course, where they just kind of throw you in the deep end. And I was thinking, like, you know, if I didn't have a background, I'd probably be struggling quite a bit right now, because you got to learn it all on your own while also taking far more difficult classes like financial mathematics or derivatives and things like that, right? So I think the best way to learn computer science and programming, and honestly, you don't really need to learn computer science, you kind of get a feel for it, but to learn programming, right? Especially, I think for us, the Python is the key, right? Is books like if you guys have taken the data science class, there's Levinson, but actually I've got it here, the Python for Finance cookbook by Eric Levinson. It's a fantastic book. You know, I was skeptical of it because you're always skeptical of textbooks that professors assign you, but I've used it since then, and it's fantastic. It's so useful. You can learn Python from scratch from this, just in a finance context. And then doing projects that you're interested in is the best way to learn. When a professor tells you, like, you know, you do this project for this class or do this group project for this class, you know, we had to do on like dollar cost averaging versus constant investments, that kind of thing. It's fine, you get a feel for it, but then when you do something of your own volition, something that you want to do, you might find something that you wouldn't normally learn. So, like, for example, in undergrad, around COVID times, we were playing a lot of FIFA. We were playing a lot of Ultimate Team. If you know about Ultimate Team, there's a thing called Weekend League, where they don't have it really anymore, but the Foot Champions, you play 30 games over a 2-day period with your team. it's a win-loss, so it goes to shootouts, and then you can kind of measure, and then at the end of every game you get your stats, right? So I had nothing to do with COVID. I was on co-op. So what I would do is I would play weekend league, have my team laid out, take pictures of the stats at the end, import them all into Excel sheets, pull them into Python, and try and do some analysis on, like, what play styles are doing well, which players. Like if I play Lewandowski up top versus if I play two strikers up top, do I do better against these teams? And I did that analysis, and when I was applying for jobs right after undergrad, that was the main topic of conversation in most of my interviews. Like, you see this GitHub code link that you post, and like gathered all this data on your own, you did all that. Like, yeah. So I think that's the best way to do it. Obviously, if you don't like football, don't do it on FIFA, but like whatever topic that you find interesting, and there's so many data sets available in Kaggle. I think just do that, because everybody who graduates from MSQF is going to have in their GitHub a Python script to value a call option, or a Python script to value a swap. Everyone's going to do that. It's not going to set you apart unless you come up with a new way to do it. But if you do that, I mean, that's a different story altogether, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
That's fair. I think those were the questions that we had. I just had one last question from a broader perspective, from being a Northeastern undergrad and a grad as well. How do you feel the brand has come up in these few years, and what is its situation now in terms of the recruiters like Morgan Stanley or any other players in the big players in the market? How is Northeastern as a brand?
I can't speak to it from the perspective of recruiters or companies, but from my perspective, the brand has grown immensely, right? Like, I mean, when I joined in 2016, it was a good school, but what drew me to it was the co-op and the fact that it was in Boston. If I'd applied even like a couple years later, I don't think I would have gotten in. It's become wildly popular. Yeah, wildly popular, very competitive. And at least in the Boston area, the brand definitely holds the weight. When you say it, when I meet somebody at Morgan Stanley like that I haven't met, and I say, yeah, I went to Northeastern, they know what Northeastern is. It doesn't hold the same weight as saying like, oh, I went to Harvard or I went to MIT, obviously, but you have that cloud that comes with Northeastern. And I think one thing that sets Northeastern students apart that I think people are starting to understand is that there's a lot of practical training that everyone goes through, like co-ops and things like that. So I think there's a notion in the industry that when you get a Northeastern student, they're going to be easier to train and faster to integrate. And they're going to have some kind of idea of corporate culture and how to behave in a corporate environment. Whereas if you get somebody who's never had an internship or a co-op before, they might have gone to Harvard or MIT, but never worked in an office. So it takes a longer time to adjust. Whereas we all went through that, at least for the undergrads, when we were like 19, we were like, it's an induction by fire, you kind of have to learn. And it's easier to learn that time because when you're a co-op, everyone expects you to make mistakes. You could mess something up so badly, and it's like, all right, he's 19. It's fine, give him another chance. But when you do it at 24, it's a bit more like, how come you didn't know how to do that? That type of thing. So I think it's definitely grown, and I think it's fantastic. Northeastern as a brand and as a college, yeah.
And that's lovely to hear. I think that's been it. Thanks a lot for your time on this.
All right.
Thanks a lot for being on the pod. It was a really good conversation.
Yep.
Like a very different perspective from a Quant Finance student.
Yep.
And we'll leave all your LinkedIn links in the description below.
Sure, if you want to. I mean, I want to say though, like, I really think what you guys are doing in this podcast is great. Like, giving people a chance to hear from people who've gone through this recently. And I saw you had somebody on who went through it quite a while back recently. I watched part of that episode, and that perspective was interesting to hear as well. And it's obviously great for networking if you like doing that sort of thing. You're leaving my LinkedIn links in the bio, which is fine, and anybody can feel free to message me for advice. Just please don't send me a link to something on Morgan Stanley's talent portal and be like, can you refer me for this? And I'm just not going to respond to that. I mean, happy to have a conversation, and if we get along, I'm happy to refer. Like, if either of you guys need a referral, I'd be happy to do that. But if I don't know you, I'm not going to refer you, right? So just putting that out there right now, so people don't think, let me go for referrals. Anyway, it's been great talking to you guys.
It was lovely.
Great talking to you too.
Thanks a lot. Have
All
a
right.
good one.
Have a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.